What seems such a simple scene will very quickly turn uncanny. This whole stage of the storyline begins with an imperial census and, I'm guessing, a somewhat starry-eyed young couple travelling together for the very first time and then arriving in his ancestral home, but then discovering there's no guest rooms. There's no guest rooms available. Perhaps it's his own very first visit to Bethlehem. It's not just a shock that there's no guest room available for them, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for him, it's embarrassing for her, it's embarrassing for each hospitable household that turns them away. And then, how lowly does this feel? Having nowhere comfy to stay cannot have been easy. Childbirth without her own close relatives cannot have been easy. But now, is there no dignity? A farmer's feeding trough? It's, grubby and prickly and noisy and smelly. Hardly the crib she'd been hoping for. Oh well, make the best of it. Wrap him in a bunny rug, tuck him away. And then the grand storyline shifts to a place that we would never possibly have guessed. The camera cuts to humble shepherds living the outdoor life out in their fields. We might have expected, say, the local mayor or maybe the rabbi, the principal of the local school. Instead, this is more like old-time milkmen heading out on their rounds. Or perhaps the Garbos warming up their trucks. These are such normal, everyday, can-do, practical kind of men. On this particular night, they are on duty. So this is not just a cosy campfire. This is serious work, protecting their flocks against thieves and predators. They are on watch, carefully monitoring their sheep and scanning the hills for any possible threat. Presumably they're brave and armed and ready for action. Little can they guess what wonder and fear is about to befall them. Because then is it fight, flight or freeze? Eyes goggling, necks bristling, knees quaking, mouths agape and kind of shielding their faces. Wherever did you appear from? It's utterly uncanny and totally terrifying. I notice when we listen to this reading later on, maybe you'll notice it as well, until the angels have gone, the shepherds don't utter a single word. Though clearly they're absorbing everything and taking careful notes, I do wonder, decades later, did Luke, the gospel writer, did he get to interview one of the shepherds before he wrote down the gospel for us? Because what this dazzling, scary, gentle angel announces will not only change their lives forever, it will change the entire course of human history. What does the angel say? Fear not. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Now, I want to pause the story at this moment, and I want us to think together about news. I want you to think about all different kinds of news. And I actually want to make this a little bit interactive. In a moment, I want you to be calling out bits of news that you think of when I ask some particular questions. Some news arrives by text message. Some is announced on the television, some comes in a Christmas newsletter, or sometimes it's an actual phone call from interstate. Sometimes you spot something on social media and you think, oh, that's interesting. Perhaps it's in an old-time newspaper. There's all different kinds of news. Now, here's my question. What news can you think of that touches almost everyone in the world today? What news can you think of that touches almost everyone with wide impact? I hear, there are enough of us, we might need some hands. I heard Gillian. COVID, absolutely. I saw another hand down the back. Was it the same answer? It was going to be the same answer. Are there any answers other than COVID? What kind of news touches almost everyone? Climate change, yes. The COVID vaccine, I'm going to come back to that one in just a little while. That's an excellent, excellent example. Thank you. Anyone else? When someone really important, say in the royal family, dies or gets married, or we think that impacts us, we take notice of it. Yeah. Now, what's one that I thought of? If a big financial corporation crashes, that impacts everyone. Any more? Yes, I can see behind the pillar. Yes, that's a curious one. What else did I have? When a military force invades. So I was thinking of the Taliban in Afghanistan this year. When a group of children is tragically killed. Any more examples of news that touches almost everyone with wide impact? The kind of thing that maybe once you're a certain age, you know, yeah, I remember exactly where I was when I heard that news. So I think of like 9/11. That impacted everyone. Any more examples? The death of Princess Diana in 1997. Port Arthur Massacre. There's so many of those are bad news stories, aren't they? There's so much bad news in the world. Now, here's my second question. What news can you think of, whether it comes by text message or telephone call, or you see it in social media, or it's in the newspaper or the television or wherever you see it, what news can you think of that brings genuine joy? Go, Gillian. The birth of a baby. Easy one. Another one? I see a hand, yes? The COVID vaccine. I'm going to come back to that one. You're way ahead of me, you know. You're way ahead of me. Yes, I think it's Sally's hand that I can see in the dark. I couldn't quite hear that. Can someone repeat it for? She doesn't have to repeat a course at uni. That is fantastic news. That also is a fantastic example of good news that brings genuine joy. When a little child is found. There's so much happy news in the world, isn't there? A child is born, a marriage is announced, a friendship is restored, a holiday is planned, a big project is finished, a new job is offered. There's so much happy news. Now, as I thought about this, and as I said, there's one of us who is way ahead of all the rest, I thought, there's news that has wide impact, and mostly it's bad news. And there's news that brings genuine joy, and mostly It's personal news, like uni results. And there's actually not that much overlap of news that has wide impact and brings genuine joy for all. And so that got me wondering, well, what types of good news can possibly cause great joy potentially for everyone? And the two best examples that I thought of, the first one was the war is over, and you may have seen this photo before. It's a famous photo that was taken in downtown Sydney in 1945 when World War II finished. There was dancing in the streets. There was sheer relief. It was brilliant news that brought genuine joy for almost everyone. And it's in the overlap of those two. And, of course, the second one was when we were told there are new vaccines and they're on the way. And we're going to be able to roll them out and deliver them to entire populations way, way, way back in 2020. We thought maybe this awful pandemic can be constrained and limited and escaped. And the thing about both of those pieces of news is that they are news about calamity averted. Whether it's an ongoing calamity or else a potential future calamity, it's news of calamity averted. To understand why does this news bring such joy with such wide impact, what you need to know is how overwhelming and inescapable the calamity had seemed. And so whether it's global war or global pandemic, there's a sense of maybe there's a way out, maybe there's hope, maybe there's a new life to be lived, maybe salvation is here. To grasp why the news is so good, you need to start computing what calamity, ongoing calamity or potential future calamity, what calamity are we being saved from? What the angel will announce shortly is this: I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people, wide impact and genuine joy. And then he says, today in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Now, what kind of saviour are they hoping for? Maybe a political saviour who will get rid of the Romans, maybe an economic saviour or a medical saviour or an educational saviour. In fact, this saviour turns out to be so much more. After centuries and centuries of waiting, here at last is the Messiah who will overthrow the evil that lies behind all other evils. I'll say that again. Here at last is the Messiah who will overthrow the evil that stands behind all other evils and reconcile us with God. Why is that such good news? Because given our shared fallenness, which leads to things like just ugly, everyday selfishness or pride or envy or anger, and then all kinds of relationship breakdown, including our relationship with God. Well, we need a Messiah like this. It's good news. And given God's righteous judgment, which is surely coming, this is the best news, the deepest news, the farthest reaching news, the longest lasting news, the most life-giving news there is. And it's good news not just for professionally trained ministers, and it's good news not just for people who seem to have their lives in order, and it's good news not just for the intelligent or for the wealthy or for the famous or for the educated. Also, it's not just good news for the young or just for the sick or just for the downtrodden or just for the down to earth. Quite simply, this is the most glorious news that there ever will be. It potentially has life-changing impact on every single person who will ever hear it. It is the best news. It is the deepest news. It is the farthest reaching news and the longest lasting news and the most life-giving news there is for whomever will accept that Jesus is the Messiah, the Lord. No wonder the angel calls it good news that will cause great joy for all the people. No wonder. To overthrow the evil behind all other evils and to reconcile us to God is a massive, massive mission, and no other Messiah, no other Saviour could possibly pull this off. And that is why, miracle of miracles, he whom angels worship now lies vulnerable and helpless in his young mum's loving gaze. This is why the immortal God comes to share our frail mortality. In the manger, who is this? It's God the Lord himself, now come humbly in human flesh. There's a whole drama that still needs to be played out, but this surely will become the most life-giving news there ever will be, with such wide impact and causing genuine joy for all who accept it. Now, obviously, to receive this as good news, you need to get why you need such a Saviour. In order to get why you need such a Saviour, you need not to be distracted from God by 21st century comforts and amusements and toys. You actually need to wrestle. Here's a question for you. Which is harder to believe? A or B? Is it harder to believe, A, that such good news was first announced by an angel to humble shepherds in a rural backwater 2,000 years ago? Or B, that you personally need such a Saviour? You need to wrestle with that. I'd say start wrestling by coming back as our guest on any regular Sunday. Ideally then sign up for a short course investigating who is this Jesus and introducing him. This story that starts in a manger leads to a grisly cross and then to a glorious crown. It really is good news that brings great joy, and you too can be included. Now, as we finish up, of all possible signs, why the manger? Why the Saviour in a manger? Obviously, this is a very cute form of actually it was noisy and smelly and prickly and uncomfortable. Why the manger? Just imagine this. Imagine that the shepherds were told, look, you need to go and find this private water birthing centre, and they'd be going, you what? We're allowed in there? Imagine the shepherds have been told, actually, go and find this is a very exclusive private birthing centre. It's in, ironically, St Mary's Hospital in London, which is where the royals are born. We can't go in there. We don't belong there. We couldn't even get past the guards. Do you see the point of the manger? The manger says to the shepherds, he's just like one of us. And if he's just like one of us, maybe he's come for us. Not just the rich, not just the powerful, not just the elite, maybe for us. And in fact, I would say partly that's why this happens not in London or in Rome, but in little Bethlehem. It's why it's announced not to the local rabbis or the politicians, but to the shepherds, the normal everyday people. It's why they find him lying not in some luxurious crib, but in a farmer's feeding trough. This Saviour comes genuinely for all people. That's why it's so important that they find the Saviour in a manger. Because if the only sign given was, say, a stunning Christmas comet alerting all the nations, which that's a whole other story, but if that was the sign the shepherds were told to look for, they couldn't possibly guess that he had come as one of them, for them. The manger assures them this is good news that will cause great joy for all the people, including you. Including you. In just a few moments, we're going to watch a short clip together, and then a small ensemble is going to sing a very recently written Christmas song. So sit back and enjoy that, and then we'll have our fourth reading from Luke chapter 2. I want to finish with a question. What will it take for you to receive this news as good news that causes great joy, even for you? Let's watch this clip.